What do the 49ers have to do to make this a successful offseason? We're going to talk about that, Brock Purdy, and a whole lot more on tonight's Hammer Nayls Show. Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday night, and that means it is time for the Hammer and Nails Show. I am Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and with me, as always, can't be Hammer and Nails if you don't have Jessie Naylor. How you doing, Jessie?
I'm doing fantastic, Jack. You're right. Can't be hammer and nails without the nails half. It wouldn't make any sense.
That wouldn't just be me banging myself over the head. We're getting into the offseason, and tomorrow's a big day for the 49ers, and I think it's gonna show us a lot of what's going on. And really quick, before we get there, I just want to shout out a few folks over in the comment section because we have a few that are always in here. We have Raphael 562 member of the Toolbox says, "What's up, Jack?" Jesse, members of the Toolbox, and everyone. We got CJ Gray, who I think CJ was out in Philly for the championship game. He says, "Yo." We got Burnt Reynolds. It's Hammer time, Hammer Nails time. And then we've got E. Kim in the house who says, "Hey, Jack and Jesse." And Move. He says that we need to, hold on, let me get to it. Move Jimmy G on. And we're going to get to what's going to happen with Jimmy G. And I got kind of an interesting take on that whole thing with the Jimmy G and the 49ers and some old history on that too that we'll bust out when we get to what the 49ers need to do this offseason. But before we get there, tomorrow's really the big day, I think, for a lot of things that are going to be happening around the 49ers this offseason. There's already been a lot of discussion on this topic throughout the first few weeks of the since they lost in the championship game, really. But it's Brock Purdy, and tomorrow Brock Purdy has his surgery. It's going to be taking place tomorrow in Texas. And based off of that, we're going to know what his timeline is for recovery based off of whether they can do the regular internal brace surgery. That is what they're hoping that it's going to be, or if they have to go in and do a full-blown Tommy John or something, something else that's going to take a longer time to recover. So, Jesse, when you look at this, how does the Brock Purdy timeline impact the 49ers?
Oh, man, this has a major impact. Even if it's the hybrid surgery, it sounds like that's 9 months. I mean, that puts them out till late in the season. This is going to impact how they really structure their free agency. Do they have to go get another quarterback they can truly, really rely on that's going to cost you anywhere between $5 and $10 million a year? Just so that you can win games if Trey Lance goes down? Do they say, hey, we want to go all in this year? They're going to do something crazy and go after a bigger name guy? I think that this opens the door for so many possibilities if Brock Purdy is not going to be back in the timeline that they think he's going to be back. And it changes how you spend money. We're going to talk about free agency and things that they've got to go do to win a Super Bowl. But at the same time, that money gets cut down significantly if you've got to go spend on a quarterback. So I'm curious to see what the outcome of this surgery is. If it's what they expected, I think we're all crossing our fingers for that because we don't want to spend money on another quarterback if you don't have to. We would like to see these two kids battle it out. But it changes everything. It really changes everything. I think that we would also assume at that point that Trey Lance would be the starter, and we would at least be able to see that for 12 weeks into a season and see how that goes for him and if he can be the guy potentially. And if Purdy's healthy, then, game plan is exactly what we've been thinking the whole time. But it's funny because we're going to go into free agency and things they must do. But I mean, really, that's contingent on the 5 to 6 month game plan, not the 9 to 12 month game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good. The other part of it too that's interesting I think we talked about this before, but when you talk about these elbow injuries they tend to, you've seen develop quicker than the baseball that have had these surgeries. The couple of those Nick Mullins, he had the internal brace deal, 5 months. Jake Delhomme had the Tommy John surgery. He was 7 from surgery to being cleared. So, regardless, if it's not the internal brace, the 49ers are going to this is going to get pushed back to the point where they're going to have to make a decision. And you're right, it could have a major impact on it, because if he's not going to be able to be ready to go by the time the season starts, now you're not talking about signing one quarterback. You're talking about having to probably sign, one plus use a draft pick on another. You're going to have to bring in multiple guys just to get yourself through camp, let alone when you get into the season, because they always have at least 3 during camp. The couple of years that I've been up there, they've had, I think there was 3 last year throughout the season. There was 4. But it was 3, and then the year before they had 4, because they started off with Nate Sudfeld and Josh Rosen battling it out for the 3rd spot, and eventually they got rid of Rosen during camp. But they're going to have to make some additions if Purdy's not going to be able to be there, and that could cause some serious ramifications of what they can do in free agency as far as who they bring in. And I agree with you too. The other part of it could be a positive for the 49ers, and that they'll actually be forced in a way to have to see what Trey Lance can do. Because they're going to have to give him a lot more reps than even if it was a competition kind of a deal.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I guess that would be the silver lining. But again, if you have to go spend $8 to $10 million on another quarterback, then that significantly does cut into what you are going to do or plan to do this offseason. That's going to impact who you can go after, who you're planning to re-sign. So I'm curious to see how this thing plays out. Like I said, I think we're all just hoping for the 6-month variety. That would be in line with what we've game planned for and would make things a lot easier. But you're right. We're going to know tomorrow. Tomorrow is the big day, because tomorrow is officially when 49ers offseason starts. I mean, really, we've been talking for a couple weeks, but we don't really know what's going on with Brock Purdy, and that is a big ball that needs to drop before we can figure this thing out.
Yeah, and the situation with Brock Purdy has led to all kinds of different discussions already. Whether because you've heard Matt Mayoko and his report saying that the 49ers players would be upset if Brock Purdy is not the starting quarterback, and you're hearing reports from various places where Purdy is the guy, and then you hear a few where it's not, and so on and so forth. But you put out a tweet on Saturday that I thought was interesting, where you said, if the 49ers really have the mentality of this is a win now team, and we don't have time to develop a young quarterback and have since they took Lance, they give up so many assets to not hold true to what was needed. Either the reports are wrong or they are royally effed up. Which is it? So maybe before we get into it, just go through where you're coming from with that tweet, just so that we can discuss it. Everybody knows where we're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has to be one or the other, because Trey Lance, there was clearly a timeline of needing to get ready to be the guy. And if you, for the last 3 years, have been in a situation where you feel like you can't hand the reins fully over to him without having either somebody look over his shoulder or have him fighting for the job or whatever that would take for him to be the starter, then that tells me that the game plan you had wasn't a good game plan. It wasn't a well thought out game plan. Maybe it wasn't a game plan at all. Maybe it was just, hey, last ditch effort. We really don't want Jimmy here. We tried to go after every veteran quarterback. We can't really stay at 12 because we can't dictate things. We'll get up to 3 and we'll make a decision there. I don't know, but I don't, to me, if Trey Lance is a bust, right, then the 49ers are the ones that messed up. I mean, that's not Trey Lance's fault. Trey Lance didn't pick himself. Trey Lance didn't ask to go through all the things that have happened here. And so either the 49ers basically the 49ers have royally effed this up, or the reports that we're hearing aren't necessarily true. And he really does have a chance and has had a chance in the past, and they wanted him to be the guy, but other things have gotten in the way. I don't know what is true. And I think over this offseason, we'll figure out a little bit more. But if it is true that they just want to hand the reins over to Brock Purdy, if he's healthy and he's the guy, then you kind of effed up. And so who's taking accountability for that? Somebody's got to. That's a lot of assets to give up. ton of assets for a guy that you never really believed in or truly tried to develop in the proper way.
Yeah, it's the way that I look at it is I don't think it's a situation where they're giving up on Lance yet. I know what the reports say, but the majority of the reports from the people that I listen to are that if they were to go into a competition starting today, let's just say get rid of the elbow thing. Let's just talk about about where they are right now with those guys. That Purdy would have the leg up, but there would still be a shot for Lance to overtake him. That they want to have a competition between the two and let the best man win. But I do think you go into that with Brock Purdy being the leader. At the same time, I do think that there's an opportunity for Trey Lance here. So now, you add in the fact that there is the elbow surgery at the injury that's taking place. Now you have a head start for Trey Lance. He's going to have all offseason up until training camp at least to be the guy. And I think if he comes out and he is on the money and he is, some of the little, issues that he dealt with, in year 1 and 2 aren't there. If he's more consistent in those types of things and he shows he can be the guy and he blows them away. We've talked about this a lot. The need for Trey Lance to show that he's the guy. That was kind of what we talked about in year 1. If he can come out and show that he's the guy and leaves no doubt, I think that changes the discussion a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. And like I said, I may be reading the situation completely wrong, but I don't know what he can show during OTAs and the offseason program to override games in the regular season and playoffs. I don't know. And maybe he can in Kyle Shanahan's mind. I don't know how he does that in the team's mind. Even if he had blown their socks off as a rookie, I mean, I don't think they would have started him over Jimmy Garoppolo. I know that you were under the impression that, that it was a competition, and maybe that's true, but I get the sense that the team's mind was made up. Now, Kyle Shanahan's a different story. If Kyle Shanahan, it's his decision ultimately, but I tend to think that there's not really a lot he can do outside of perfection to even really give himself a shot if they are both healthy. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, the thing going back to like 2021, and that obviously they didn't say there was a competition. They didn't want to put that pressure on Trey Lance to be the guy.
Right.
So that's why they always kind of said it was going to be Jimmy. But if you just kind of go through the pattern, and I know we talked about this a little bit too,
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going to be the starter unless he showed above a shadow of a doubt. And he did that, though. That's the thing, is when they started training camp, he was making plays that everybody was like, wow, that's a play, right? Like, he was making play after play. It was really high level stuff, to the point where after that Kansas City game, where he, I think it might even been right up before that Kansas City game when John Lynch said he's starting to push Jimmy Garoppolo. I think there was discussions in the building about, hey, we need to start giving this guy more opportunities because he's performing so well against where he is. We need to see what he can do at the next level. And so he had done so well up to that point, and then they went down to LA to take on the Chargers, and they had the joint practices before that, and that's the time when the first team reps for Trey Lance really ramped up, was down in La Jolla. I wasn't there. I know, but looking at the reports from that time period, there was a leveling off of his performance during practices at that point. And then you got into the game and he didn't elevate himself above Garoppolo. Remember that game? They both played at about the same level, right? It was, and then when the starters were out, Trey Lance took off again, and you saw him do really well. And so I think that's where the decision was made. Okay, we're going to go with Jimmy, but we're going to keep trying to feed him in. And I think that's where maybe that's the point where I think the players got involved, is because they didn't want to go back and forth between the guys. It wasn't so much, maybe I know that they really like Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't think that those guys, even though Kyle Shanahan listens to them, if Kyle Shanahan really listened to him, he wouldn't have made the decision after year 1 to say that Trey's the guy going into 2022 2022. At least I don't think that's the case. I think he was always building him up to be the guy in 2022. And then we came into this season and he was supposed to be the starter. It was his show to run. And, unfortunately it only lasted 5 quarters. And then they lose a whole year of the development, really. And then because he's out, now they lucked in, I've seen this and other people say this on Twitter, and it's accurate, because they lucked into Brock Purdy. Because if they felt like Brock Purdy was going to do what Brock Purdy did, then why is Jimmy Garoppolo? Why you keeping on with Jimmy Garoppolo, right?
For sure.
But he came out there, and the one thing I'll say about Brock Purdy is from the moment he stepped on the field, he made plays.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that's the biggest difference between his play and Trey Lance, is that the moment he stepped on the team, there was no change in the way that the offense moved the ball, and they actually accelerated a little bit from where they were with Jimmy Garoppolo.
And that's what I'm saying. So, like, in your opinion, what does that percentage difference have to be for Trey Lance to earn the job? Like, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, Trey Lance is playing at a 9 throughout camp, and Brock Purdy is easing his way back in and he's playing at a 7. Do you think that's good enough? Or do you think it's like he has to be almost perfect, or Brock Purdy has to look really bad and not healthy? Like, I
don't know if I would say almost perfect, but he's going to have to be better than where he was last year.
Right.
Because last year, even during training camp, was a struggle for him. And I get it. He's going up against the ones, but for me, there's just routine throws that need to be made that aren't being made. And it's not that he's not throwing to the right spot, because he is throwing to the right spot. So that's good. That he's mentally, he's able to process where the ball's supposed to go, but it's that physical ability to then get the ball to the guy. And that's where he struggled in camp. It was just, there's a little bit of inaccuracy on those quick throws that you have to make in this offense. Those like quick, it's hard. I don't know how to really explain it other than just say quick twitch, where that guy's coming in your face and you can't really get into your full wind up and throw the ball like you want to. It's just, you got to, pump it out there. That's where the difference is between these two guys. I think it'll be interesting to see if after being out as long as he was, if Trey Lance is able to understand that and make the adjustments in his game to be able to do that and do it consistently.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So you think if he can fix those things and do what he's done with the mobility and some of the deep shots and those types of things, then that could be enough to win the job potentially. Yeah,
he just needs to be able to consistently move the ball, right? When the throws are there, it needs to be more of an automatic. I know it's hard because you look at the numbers. Like, for example, the throws under 10 yards, he does pretty good in the 0 to 9 range. But like behind the line of scrimmage throws, right, or whatever, those underneath throws where you look at the numbers between him and Brock Purdy is like at 94%. Right. And you've got him at Trey Lance is around 60%. Those are the ones where it's get the ball out of your hands. And sometimes those can be a little bit more difficult. So I think that's it. And then also, we heard a lot of, when you get into Trey Lance, and we know that he didn't play with George Kittle. So that's going to be the other thing, right? Well, let me step that back. We know he didn't play with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. So how does that play into his game as well? Because I think it's going to help him from the running standpoint. I think it's going to help the offense as a whole with the running standpoint. If he's able to run, if his agility and speed is all there, coming off of the broken ankle, and he's the same guy that he was beforehand, I think that helps them in the running game.
Yeah.
And does it help him a little bit in the passing game? We talk a lot about, there's been talk about him not playing with those guys. He did play with George Kittle, though. He played with them against Houston. That's the only game of his career so far where he's had more than one turnover worthy play. It was in the Houston game. He had 2 in that game. He had 1 against Seattle in his second half that he was in there. He had 1 against the week prior to the the game prior, I think it was in Arizona. He had
Arizona,
one.
yeah.
He had 2 against Houston, and he only had 1 against Chicago. So that's the one. That's the outlier game for him. But it is the game that he had George Kittle. So it's just going to be interesting. Like again, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, a year off, another year to absorb it. Can he step it up?
Yeah. And I'm curious to see. I mean, I want to see how it goes down too. And I mean, I genuinely hope that they both just have a real shot at it. I hope that Purdy's healthy, and I hope that it's a real competition. And if it's an open competition, then, you know, may the best man win. No issue with that. I personally don't feel like it is a true competition, but maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong and what you're saying is right, it makes a lot of sense. I would hope that would be the case. And I'm curious to see how it plays out for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see how it works out, like in May. And you know, I know they don't have it, but that's a time period where he can show some of the accuracy pieces, right? Because I've talked to you about this in the past, where it's like, you know, when you're throwing against air, it should be almost automatic. That's why, like when I saw Purdy struggling again before the Seahawks game, I think it was, or the Cowboys, one of those two, I was like, that's odd, because that doesn't usually happen with them. Whereas like Trey Lance, that was something that we talked a lot about during training camp and stuff. Or just even missing those throws is kind of is worrisome to me, because those are your layup lane throws, right? Those are the ones you're just walking through. Those should be easy. So we'll see. He's going to have opportunities, and you know, there was a comment over here that I want to put up, because it's, you know, it's Levine says. Lance will put in the work. He's a 22-year-old kid. He's allowed to live a little. And absolutely. And that's what we know about Trey Lance. I have no doubt that Trey Lance is working his rear end off to get himself as ready as he can for the opportunity that's ahead of him. And I don't, Trey Lance is a smart guy. He understands. He's very, very smart as far as what's going on. He understands how to do it. He understands how to work hard. So has nothing to do with that at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's like the least of my concerns is like his work ethic. Is he mentally ready? Like those things. Even Shanahan said, yeah, I mean, a couple weeks into camp, he had the playbook, and this was the first year. So I don't think mentally anybody's worried about Trey Lance. It's just some of the things physically. And you know, it's funny because coming out of the draft, Jack, you and I had talked about this, and this was one of the things that we said he had to work on then, which was some of his arm angles on the short throws, you know, bending it around defensive ends and being able to just get it without the laces, fire out quick. And even last year, and I said this as well, and it showed up on the videos that you and Lombardi and Grant and whoever are posting, even on the videos where it was like they would practice hike and then just a quick like screen, you could see he tried to get like everything perfect. It was a full throwing motion. It's like, no, you got to get it and fire it, get it and fire it. But it's like he's got to get his feet set. He's got to go through the whole, you know what I mean? You can see those things. It's very obvious. So I know exactly what you're talking about. You were trying to explain it, and I'm like, I know exactly where you're going with it because I saw it.
Yeah. No, I know. And you know, we got a lot of other folks here too. I want to make sure that I'm really clear for everybody else too, because I had this. People don't think I don't like Trey Lance. I don't dislike Trey Lance, and I don't like or dislike really any of these guys, because that's just not. I'm not able to do that as what I'm doing. I see what I see, and that's why when you go through my like training camp reports, I always had something positive about Trey Lance on a daily basis. My Twitter might be a little bit different, but on the write-ups, there was always there. Let's get off the quarterback thing. I know that people love it though, and that's why we have so many people watching already. But getting into the offseason now, and you know, what is the one thing that the 49ers must do this offseason? So the 49ers must what this offseason?
I mean, there's a few must things in my opinion, but assuming that Purdy's healthy, we're going to go off the assumption that Purdy's going to be there and they've got their quarterback situation figured out. The one thing they must do is solidify the trenches, both sides. And I think they're both equally as important. I mean, they obviously have to protect the quarterbacks. We do see that quarterbacks often get injured here, and so they have to figure that out. And then they have to figure out a way to consistently get after opposing quarterbacks and remain strong in the trenches. And we've talked about it, but it is an interesting thing to me to look at all the assets that the Shanahan and Lynch era have poured into that defensive line since they've gotten here. And now you're looking at it going, and this is a weakness going into the offseason. Quite a big weakness. I mean, really, they need multiple pieces. They're losing their depth pieces. They don't really have a guy opposite of Bosa. Obviously, they have Bosa, which is great. You have the defensive player of the year. That's a great start. Armstead's good, but they don't have like another true pure pass rusher. And then they also need some girth in the middle. They need to be able to stop the run consistently and add to that depth. So yeah, it's the trenches for me. They've got to figure out a way to solidify the trenches on both sides of the ball. And I have some ideas on how to do that, but that's, in a nutshell, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I look at it. I'm a little different. I think when you look at the offensive on the trenches, when we talk about the trenches, for me, it's a little more on the defensive side than the offensive side. But that's where it really gets interesting with this team because they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of pieces that can move around. Now, whether we believe that these guys are ready to go or not, that's a different story. So you look at for example, Raymond said, I put this up there already. He said, ensure that a center is solidified. Well, when you look at the center position and you look at Jake Brendel, he's going to be 31 this year, but as a 30-year-old in his first full season as a starter in the NFL, I thought he was very good, especially in pass protection. Now, run blocking, not necessarily the best at moving guys, but that was the same situation they had the previous season with Alex Mack. They just didn't move guys very well at the point of attack. But Jake Brendel, and then behind Brendel, he's a free agent. So if you don't bring him back, I think he's the one. If you're looking at the free agents, I think he comes back. I think they can get him back on a deal that makes sense for them. So as far as center goes, I think they're going to be okay. If you have him, you have Nick Zakel, who's there. What do they do with Daniel Brunskill? He's an unrestricted free agent. I think Brunskill kind of ties into what they decide to do with Mike McGlinchey. Do they bring McGlinchey back or do they let him go? I think if you're going to splurge on bringing one of your guys back, I think it's McGlinchey that makes the most sense because despite what everybody thinks, I think he's a really good right tackle. I really think it's the focus on the defensive side. And even over there, you start to really dig into it. And, Javon Kinlaw, I think, is the guy that's the weakness in the run defense. He hasn't really been able to anchor the way that you'd want him to be able to play, which is too bad for a guy who, when you look at him, he is more of a run stuffer than a pass rusher. But we've seen him struggle a little bit with being able to anchor and get pushed around. Do they need to go out and spend big money there, though? I don't know. I think for me, if the 49ers can bring back Kevin Givens, he's a restricted free agent, so you can bring him back. If they then get Charles Omenihu is a guy who can play inside and outside. You go out and you get one more run stuffing defensive tackle as a free agent. There's a few of those on the market. One of them was from Kansas City. I was there today because I got myself into trouble over on Twitter. But we got a guy like Nadi from Kansas City, who's one of those guys that's in there. There's a few others, but that's one of them that jumped out because I just saw him play in the Super Bowl. So that's why I'm looking at him because of his name, Delvin Tomlinson. But I think he's going to be a little too expensive for what they need out of that spot. I think you're in a pretty good position if you can do those things, and you might even be able to get that. You had a really good thing on out there earlier today where maybe you just go ahead and you just draft that defensive tackle to be that run stuffing guy. You can get him probably in the middle round, and then you go out and you get a defensive end instead. Because I think when you look at the defensive line, stopping the run's one thing. I think they're going to be okay there because even with what we consider to be the issues. At that spot, they were really good stopping the run this season for the most part. That's why they had the lowest yards per attempt allowed. So I think you're looking at more of what can you do opposite of Nick Bosa. And I thought you had one that was really good. Who was that again?
Yeah, Zach Allen, who we've seen now with Arizona the last couple of years. And it's interesting because he's kind of on that Trey Hendrickson trajectory. Not quite, right? Like Trey Hendrickson had the one really breakout season before he got paid by the Bengals, but you look at the first, 3 or so years that they've actually played, very similar numbers and a very similar progression, natural progression that you're seeing there. And so if you can get him, the market value, so far it looks like it'll be around $9-10 million a year, which is much less than Ngakoue or much less than some of these defensive tackles like a Deron Payne, who, by the way, was like my guy at the trade deadline that I wanted. I'd love to have him now. I mean, if they're making a huge splash, I love Deron Payne, but I don't think defensive tackles are worth $18+ million a year. That's just me personally. So unless your name is Aaron Donald or Chris Jones, then I don't see it. And so for me, go get a Zach Allen. He's going to be inexpensive. He's a 3-down guy. He can, on base downs, be your defensive end. He can also kick inside and be a really good pass rusher for you from the inside, next to a Bosa, next to an Armstead. And then, you continue to develop a Drake Jackson. Maybe Kalia Davis also boosts up this year. T.Y. McGill was a guy that kind of came on late. You can bring back for pretty cheap, I would imagine, and go draft another defensive tackle. I mean, that's the way that I would go about this. And if I'm going to draft a defensive tackle, I'm going to draft just a run stuffing specialist. I'm going to get a guy that's 320 and plug him in the middle and just allow him to do his thing for a down every series. And so that's probably the way that I'm going to go about things.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's kind of the direction that I'm thinking too, in terms of Deron Payne. That's if you don't have a salary cap, Deron Payne's a great guy to go get. Go ahead and spend $20 million a year on Deron Payne. That's why I put out on Twitter today. Last year we said that $10 million a year for DJ Jones was too much, but now we want him to go spend $20 million because that's the name that everybody's kind of throwing out there. I see on Twitter that name just continue to pop up, and that makes no sense. If you were going to spend $20 million on 2 defensive tackles, you should have just kept DeForest Buckner when you had him in here. Here you didn't have to. Everybody points to the amount of money that was there. DeForest Buckner was on a contract. He was guaranteed 12.3 something million for that season. They could have dealt with some holdout stuff and worked around a lot of things and made it work where they kept everybody. There's things that you can do in NFL. If you like a guy enough, the salary cap is real, but you can move money around for guys that you really feel are important enough to you. And, in this case, they thought they had to make a choice. They made the choice that they made, and it's come back. They've never really filled his spot. The defense as a whole has played really well, but they're missing the pass rushing element. And, this last season, they didn't have Eric Armstead for a good portion. He was good when he came back, but it took him really until the playoffs to really get there and be able to get home on on sacks. They need him to get healthy. If they can get him healthy and get another guy off of the edge on the other side, I think that really helps them out because, somebody put this over here a minute ago, 18 sacks from one guy and 44 as a team. That's not good. And that's where the 49ers were this season. And they need to get, they lost a lot of sacks from Arden Key, and they lost a lot of sacks from Eric Armstead this year. That's where they're missing. And so the sacks aren't going to come from Deron Payne. Deron Payne had 11 sacks this season, but you look at his track record tells you it's not going to be that number for long. He was a one and done guy when it comes to that. He's not a consistent guy so far. He's never shown it. And
Eric Armstead, if you will.
Yeah.
From a sack point.
Yeah, absolutely. Armstead was really good, and he's in 2019, struggled in 2020. Bosa wasn't there. In 2021, he had a really good season, and this year he got hurt, and his numbers fell off. And so, if you can, that's why I'm saying that's kind of where I'm on the Menahu. Bring a Menahu back because he's a really good interior rusher. And Eric Armstead fully healthy. Charles Menahu next to him in pass rushing situations. I think that's a really good defensive line, especially if you get your guy that you're talking about from Arizona over there on the left side.
Yeah, and I just think that there's an inexpensive, efficient way to go about it, and they definitely need depth. I also think it depends on how much you believe in Drake Jackson. Like if you believe in Drake Jackson, then I think my plan works out great because Drake Jackson can be your 3rd down edge rusher, and then he can also be the guy that comes in and spells Bosa or Allen whenever they need it, And so for me, I think for him going into his 2nd year, they'd probably like to see him bulk up a little bit and then just be able to last for a full season. And I think if you're a third down specialist and then you're mixed in to kind of fill in throughout a game and maybe you're playing half the snaps, I think he can easily do that while he's developing and improving for that third year. So, it just, like I said, it all depends on what you think of Drake Jackson as well.
Absolutely. Again, Drake Jackson. That's a name that we hadn't touched on. And that's why I was saying, like, the 49ers have a lot of depth on this roster. It's just a matter of, do you think the depth can step up, right? Can a guy like Drake Jackson, who people are kind of forgetting about right now, can he come out and do what Talanoa Hufanga did, right? Another USC guy. I remember putting out there, hey, Talanoa Hufanga is going to be the starting safety of the 49ers next year. And everybody said, don't do that, Jack, acting like I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, I mean, you could see that the 49ers liked him. And if Drake Jackson can come out and have that kind of improvement from year 1 to year 2, the 49ers are in a really good spot here. So you're right. And it's kind of the same thing like I was talking about over in the offensive line with, do they bring back, if Mike McGlinchey goes, you still can have a heck of a competition at right tackle if you bring back Daniel Brunskill, who isn't going to be anywhere near as expensive as Mike McGlinchey to compete over there. You have there was another one there, McKivitz. You're going to have to re-sign him as well. So you let those guys compete. You even have more who we don't really want to get more involved with that, I don't think. But, there's guys there, and it's a matter of, can those younger guys step up and be what they think? Because you just look at the way the roster is constructed. The one spot that they don't have anybody right now is free safety. That's the one that we don't know what's going to happen right there. So I think if you look at the defense, when we get out of the trenches, I think free safety may be the next biggest need.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it depends. Again, does Gibson come back? I think they need to draft somebody there as well. Even if Gibson does come back, I think drafting somebody there. And also, if you go and get, let's say, a Zach Allen and Gibson doesn't come back, well, then you can also sign a Nasir Adderley type of player, most likely, for $10-12 million. And now you've got your 2 running mates on the back end of the defense. I just think things become a lot more possible when you don't spend $20 million or $18 million on an interior defensive lineman. It really opens things up for you.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think you can help me answer this one. Were the 49ers in on Chandler Jones before he signed with the Raiders? What was one of the rumors last offseason, right? That they were in talks of possibly they're interested in going that direction?
Yeah, definitely. From what I understand, they should have been in on Hassan Reddick if they weren't. Like I felt like that was a guy, although he's from Philly, it sounds like they were the front runner. But if you would have upped that money, who knows what would have happened. But yeah, I think they were in on Chandler Jones. So, maybe they still are in the market for a pass rusher from Arizona.
Yeah, it could. Chandler Jones, he's with the Raiders, right? Isn't he? He's the one that he's the one that spiked Mac Jones into the ground, huh?
Yeah.
That's one of the funniest things that I've seen all year was when I went out to at the end of the season, I went out with a buddy of mine to watch the Raiders and the Chiefs game at the end of the year, and walking around, and there was a dude that they had taken that play, and it was him spiking Mike Jones' head into the ground. That was a shirt that he had on. It was fantastic.
Oh my god!
I laughed like crazy. I had to stop. I said, "Hold on a second. Can I take a picture of your shirt?" And he thought it was hilarious too. So, it was awesome stuff. Raiders, can't complain about Raiders fans too much. So,
no.
Real quick before we get off of this, because E. Kim over here, he kept talking about the need to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. So let me just give you this one little piece, because Jimmy Garoppolo does need to go. He's one of the must goes. When you think about this you got to be an old fart like me to understand this one a little bit. But back in the old days, back in the 70s, the 49ers, there was a quarterback from Stanford named Jim Plunkett, who ended up getting drafted by the New England Patriots. He started with the New England Patriots.
Yep.
Played for the Patriots, flamed out, ended up with got traded to the 49ers, didn't do very well with the 49ers, ends up signing with the Oakland Raiders, and guess what happens? He goes on to win 2 Super Bowls.
Yep.
Now look at where we are. You have a guy from New England that the 49ers traded for. He's ready to become a free agent. The Raiders are one of the top teams that are looking for a quarterback. It would be hilarious to me if Jimmy Garoppolo signs with the Raiders and then just has some like crazy run with him.
His name is also Jim. Just saying.
There you go. You just have to drop off the E part of it. Just call him Jim Garoppolo.
Yeah.
and you got it. So there you go. That's Jack taking the Wayback Machine there, but we'll see what happens.
I like it.
The other piece is the franchise tag. So today opened up the franchise tag and the ability to put that out there. And you look at the 49ers roster, do you think that there is anybody that they would use the franchise tag on?
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I'm just trying to look at the numbers of what you'd have to pay everybody. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe Robbie Gould again, I guess, but I think that's too steep to pay a kicker as well, who's aging a little bit himself, although he's very, very good. I don't see them using the franchise tag this year. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the San Francisco 49ers. The guys that they would want to bring back, you look at probably a Jimmy Ward, you look at Mike McGlinchey, you look at Robbie Gould, Manuel Mosley. Like, I don't think any of those guys make sense to use a franchise tag on. So no, I don't believe so. What about you?
If there's going to be one, I think it's Robbie Gould. I think that's the only, you look at the numbers there for the franchise tag, 5.39 million, 5.4. That would make him the second highest paid kicker in the league. If they don't use it on him, I think what you see them do is kind of use that as a baseline number, though, for a couple year deal where they can get his cap hits a little bit, down just slightly.
Yeah.
If you're thinking that you're going to make a run in the playoffs this year, I think bringing back Robbie Gould would be important because this guy has been money in the playoffs. And we know he doesn't hit the 50 yarders necessarily, but 45 yards in, he's going to be money, and the 49ers offense generally can get that far. It's like, so I think Robbie Gould would be the one that you would want to use the franchise tag on if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like I said, I could see that for sure if they're going to use it. Can we just get Robbie Gould to like kick in the end zone though? I mean, can we get that on kickoffs? Like, that's my biggest thing with Robbie Gould is like, man, can we just like consistently put that thing in the end zone so we don't have to worry about it? That'd be great too, but that's not going to happen. His leg strength's not getting better as you age.
Yeah, that is true, especially for the special teams part of this whole thing. If they can get somebody to get the ball out there so they don't have to worry about a return, because there was a couple of times there at the end of the year where it started to get a little sketchy on that, even though overall they were better this year, but it started to get a little sketchy towards the end of the season. So I'm with you on that one. Get a guy, if Robbie Gould doesn't come back, or even if he does, let's get the ball into the end zone on those kickoffs. Even if it's a low line drive, just get that thing into the end zone and let them down it so that you can get them
right, exactly,
and let your defense work. Real quick before we log off for the night, what do you got coming up on your channel?
Yeah, I've got Sunil and I. It's Tuesday, so Real Sunil will be on with me in about 12 minutes, and we're gonna keep the conversation going over at Last Second Sports.
You're gonna keep the conversation so real, aren't you?
So real, Sunil. Yes,
that's fantastic. Sunil's a good guy. I talked to him a little bit, or messaged with him a little bit this morning on some stuff, so that's good. I really like, one of the things with Sunil that I like is that he isn't afraid to kind of step outside of the box. And there was one thing that he mentioned back, with before the championship game, where he was saying, you've got to force the Eagles to have Jalen Hurts be the runner. Make him be their primary running back, because if you can do that, you're going to have a pretty good chance of winning. And lo and behold, that son of a gun, he got it right, because that's what happened. They forced him to be he was the main guy, and the only difference was the other times that it happened, they were playing bad opponents. This time they were playing against somebody good, and it finally bit them.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you saw it. It's crazy because in those games throughout the season, those were his best games with his arm, but they were closer ones, and you saw in the Super Bowl it ended up being the difference. So yeah, interesting take, and it definitely came to fruition a little bit.
Yeah, so make sure you guys get over to Last Second Sports. It's in the description of the show. Make sure you get over there, check out Jessie and Sunil on there when they get together here in a few minutes. Also, make sure that you're subscribing over there if you're not already. And then before you leave here, if you guys can do me a favor, hit that like button. Just put up a really good tweet the other day. It might have even been earlier today. It doesn't matter how many people you have subscribed. It's the likes and the views that really are what drive things for us. So if you can hit that like button, it'd be fantastic. And then when you're done, if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more of it, hit the subscribe button, because you're going to get the shows like this with myself and Jessie and a lot of other folks. And then you're going to get some other content as well, as far as breaking news, like what's going to happen tomorrow with Brock Purdy. We'll make sure we have something up for that. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, get over to Last Second Sports as well. Get yourselves to frontyears.pressdemocrat.com at least once every other day, because that's about how often I'm updating right now on the blog with all the news over there as well. So check it all out. I want to say thanks to everybody. Jessie, thanks for making the time to get together like always.
Absolutely, brother. I love it. Tuesdays are days that I look forward to.
There you go, everybody. Thank you all so much. Hit that like button. And as Lukey says, you will win the lottery next week if you hit that like button.
That's what I heard. Everybody. I don't know. No promises.
There's a rumor going. Yeah, that's what I heard too. I heard you hit the like button, and that enters you into the chance for a lottery. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Take care, and we'll be talking to you soon.